All right, a very good morning and welcome to this edition of Morning Cafe. My name is Freddie Ndimuli. Things are looking quite encouraging at the ongoing group stages of the AFCON tournament. And yes, yesterday Tanzania may have lost, but today the kind of games that are coming up are pretty juicy.
Oh, yes.
Yes?
Oh, yes.
Talking about, let me just confirm for you.
Egypt
Ivory Coast versus Nigeria. How about that?
Oh, yes.
Another one, Egypt versus Ghana. Now, this probably looks more like a final. But even better, tomorrow, Senegal versus Cameroon.
I'm personally waiting for that. As a huge supporter for Senegal right now, it will be a determinant factor if I will still be supporting it later on.
Okay, all right. Of course, being Thursday, we'll be talking about matters relationship. A very interesting discussion coming up later.
Oh, yes. It's a whole now contrast because last week we were talking about casual dating. So this week we change gears and talk about long-term relationships. But then there's a whole now new twist on this. The Atheist Society of Kenya came out to say, propagating a 2-year marriage contract. So this particular day, we're asking you, do you support this particular proposal of the 2-year marriage contract? It seems quite interesting. Even the kind of conversation that I was having with the president of the society, really talking about...
got to talk to the president.
I got to talk to the president of the Atheist Society of Kenya. And we'll be, having that for you later on at around 8 a.m. You definitely don't want to miss that. But you can always talk to us on our socials at TV47KE on Facebook, 2047, and your Ringita _
at Freddie Ndimuli on X. I think we take a look at the traffic before we, a quick look at the headlines. All right, okay, let's take a look at the headlines on some of the big papers. On the Standard, killers chilling SMS demands revealed. That's a big one on the Standard this morning. On the Daily Nation, cabinet jitters as Ruto calls retreat. Interesting.
Right, to the next one. People daily cash crisis in schools of 64 billion Kenyan shillings state debt. They have that photo of CS Machogu, with the young people there holding the umbrella. He got to explain all that. Okay.
And on the Star, murder family tells of ambitious Rita Waeni. And this is perhaps the theme across all dailies today in Kenya. That story of Rita Waeni. Even on Taifa Leo, mbona walienda na kichwa chake? That's a question on the front page of Taifa Leo.
Right.
Those are the dailies this morning.
Let's take a look at the traffic this morning. Well, it's early enough, so you don't really expect quite a number of traffic snarl-ups at this particular hour. As you could see, the whole southern bypass, and trying to also see the whole Thika Road as well, and quite a number of, not too much traffic right about now. Trying to see into the CBD, as you can see, whole Lusaka Road as well, and feeder roads getting into the Central Business District. Will be updating you on this particular bit later on. Hopefully also getting into the weather later on to see, but right now it's about 17 degrees Celsius. And over this week, since Monday, we've been told that chances of it raining and just having those light showers are quite high. So again, yesterday said it might rain at around in the evening.
No, now in 2 days. You've been telling us it's going to rain, but it's not raining. I haven't seen any rain.
My choice of words
where I come from, it's very dry today.
The probability of it raining is quite high. I did not assure you. I just told you, wherever you placed your umbrella, look for it and
just keep it close.
Just keep it close.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll take that. I'll take that for today. Let's now take a look at the highlights this morning. And we start off with the stiff between the executive and the judiciary, and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is expected to file a petition today before the Judicial Service Commission against a judge who made an unfavorable judgment against him.
Warned femicide cases declared a national disaster following spate of gruesome killings of young women in recent weeks.
And an update from the ongoing AFCON tournament. Tanzania failed by a superior Morocco as Zambia shares spoils with DRC at the ongoing Africa Cup of Nations tournament in Ivory Coast. Well, let's not get the day's diary.
Oh, yes. And on today's diary, topping the list is that particular expectation by Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua, who is expected to present present a petition for the removal of Justice Esther Maina before the Judicial Service Commission, that is JSC, for alleged misconduct and corruption. His statement followed the invitation of Chief Justice Martha Koome challenging all Kenyans, including the executive, to table evidence linking the judge to any corruption. According to the Deputy President, this will be done at around in the noon, 2:15 p.m. there. Away from that, public hearings on the Affordable Housing Bill 2023 by the National Assembly enters the second day today. The House, through the Departmental Committee on Finance and National Planning, and that on Housing, Urban Planning and Public Works, has lined up public meetings as of today in across 19 different counties. As you flip the page, elsewhere, away from matters housing, in court today, former Assistant Director Administration and Finance at Deposit Fund Board is expected to appear before the Milimani Anti-Corruption Court today. So he's charged with failure to disclose a private interest to one's principal, where he is accused of benefiting from 12.5 million Kenyan shillings. And across the borders, still in Kenya, the Form 1 and Grade 7 registration in various secondary schools is expected to continue today. So this is even as stakeholders are lamenting the lack of teachers and classrooms in some schools. So despite the fact that, since Monday, right now, all that is going on. Across the borders, Hague-based International Criminal Court, ICC, will today deliver its judgment on conviction or acquittal pursuant to Article 74 of the Rome Statute in the case, the prosecutor versus Al-Hassan. The judgment will be read out in public. So Al-Hassan faces charges of crimes against humanity allegedly committed in Timbuktu, Mali, between the 1st of April 2012 and 28th January 2013. That is just a snippet of what will be lining up for you this particular day. In our news diary, we'll be updating this in our county diary from around 9 a.m. there as we continue. So definitely stick around for that. But then that is our cue to get into the dailies this morning.
All right. And of course, today we missed that bumper again. But then again, let's take a look at the dailies this morning. On the Standard, killer's chilling SMS demands revealed. Family of slain university student Rita Waini tells of their horror when, following her disappearance, received messages from her phone asking for 500,000 shillings, that's $500,000 bob, ransom, only to later discover her badly dismembered body at a morgue. Now, this is the main story, a main discussion point this morning. Its story has been extensively covered on pages 2 and 3. And on the front page of the Standard, they've also listed some of the other victims in recent weeks. Phyllis Jepleting, Ada Nyamsura, and Scarlett Wahu, also June Jesop. Just some of those young women who've fallen victim of gruesome murders in recent weeks, making it to the front page of the Standard. Other stories making it to the front page this morning. Inside state plan to nail Mackenzie. It's a special report on page 4. And in other news, the Teacher Service Commission moves head teachers in new changes. On the top strip of the Standard this morning, bright KCPE stars who may miss a Form 1 over fees. We're still tracking the performance in exams, and remember, it's still the first few weeks of the new year, the new academic year, so a lot is happening in as far as education is concerned. In business, Tata factory shut in tussle with county. On the international scene, Museveni's battle for the youth vote. And in sports, the thrills and upsets of AFCON. Oh yeah, AFCON tournament ongoing, and a quick look at the results from yesterday. Tanzania, our neighbors here, lost 3-0 to Morocco. Meanwhile, DR Congo drew 1-0 with Zambia. Those are the only two matches being played yesterday. But I'm still excited about the games coming up today. Equatorial Guinea versus Guinea-Bissau at 5 p.m. Ivory Coast versus Nigeria.
Oh, yes.
Wow, that's a big one. The hosts versus one of the big teams in Africa. And then the African champions, Egypt, facing Ghana. That's also a big one. Those three games today, I think Egypt versus Ghana will be the late game starting at 11 p.m.
All right. Tuangazie gazeti la Taifa leo ninayo hapo hivi. Mbona walienda na kichwa chake? Ndio swali kuu katika gazeti hili. Maswali yaibuka kuhusu kiini cha mauaji ya mwanachuo Rita Waeni mwenye miaka 20 aliyekatwa vipande ndani ya chumba jijini. Wasema ni unyama. Siku 4 baada ya kuuawa, kichwa cha Waeni hakijapatikana licha vipande vya mwili wake kupatikana katika Airbnb Roysambu, Nairobi. Familia yasema watekaji wa msichana huyo waliitisha shilingi milioni 0.5. Mingi ni katika ukurasa wa pili. Pale chini, masuala ya michezo. Namibia ni baba lao la AFCON. Waadhibu miamba Tunisia leo, zamu ya Misri na Ghana, Nigeria na Ivory Coast. Kirejea hapa nchini Kenya, Mackenzie kusalia ndani ya Pimo ya akili kabla ya kushtakiwa kwa ugaidi na mauaji. Shakahola atapimwa na daktari. Kwingineko, uchambuzi wa hadithi fupi, swala ya fasihi pale juu. Mwangaza zidisha pesa za maskini. Gavana huyo sasa ongeza bajeti ya kuwanunulia wakazi maskini ng'ombe. Sijui Fred, waweza kumbuka mara ya mwisho ng'ombe alitajwa pale Meru na kisa chake cha ng'ombe. Kishauliwa pale na kachinjwa. Sijui kama
nakumbuka wakatakata ng'ombe kwenye barabara. Yeah.
Kwingineko, uchunguzi kuhusu Matara sasa wakamilika. Ndiye mshukiwa mkuu katika mauaji ya dadake Pastor Kanyari. Na hiyo ndiyo gazeti la Taifa leo.
Let's take a look at the Daily Nation. And on the Daily Nation, the big headline this morning, Cabinet jitters as Ruto calls retreat. And the question is, a reshuffle? Anxiety has gripped Cabinet and principal secretaries after President Ruto convened a retreat early next month to review their performance. And while he has yet to drop any of his senior officials, the head of state has accused some of them of being clueless about their roles. But the planned meeting has triggered a flurry of activity. That story is on page 4. Makes for a very good read this morning. Of course, the other story that is very prominent on all the dailies this morning, also featuring on the front page of the Daily Nation, date with death, last moments of Varsity Girl. And this is a story of Rita Waeni, whose dismembered body was discovered at an Airbnb in Roysambu. And I think we need to stop calling it an Airbnb because I think it was a different kind of arrangement. An Airbnb is a particular business.
So technically short-term.
It's a short-term accommodation kind of arrangement. B&B, probably a bed and breakfast. Other highlights on the front page of the Daily Nation, Machogu rules out school fees increase. And he says, stick to official rates. That's a warning to principals. In business, direct to buy Mombasa flights to boost tourism. Fly Dubai's inaugural flight touches down at coast. This happened yesterday. And hopefully it will boost tourism. Other highlights on the front page. Property row, 3,500 households face eviction from city estate. And you do realize that the number of evictions has really gone up over the last 6 months or so. You look at each and every county, there's a case of eviction happening. Even in Eldoret, there's there are people who are being evicted, being reminded. Another story, State House and new KCC have the most mystery stuff, and this is an audit. And in sports, more shocks as Namibia stun ex-champions Tunisia. Well, this is a story from, I think, Tuesday. We do have the latest on what is happening at AFCON with yesterday's results. 3-0 against Tanzania by Morocco and 1-0 between DRC and Zambia. And that's the front page of the Daily Nation today. We can move on to another daily.
Let's cross over to the Star. And on the Star, Mada family tells of ambitious Rita Waini. And fourth-year GOtv student met a known man on social media days before her death, on pages 4 and 5 as well. But other stories making it to the Star. On the very bottom scroll there, bitter rivalry as Omolo Owalo seek to turn Raila tide. Other highlights featured on the front page of the Star. On the right, let's scroll there. HIV in the streets, medics warn of crisis in Eldoret. And they say young people have some of the highest new HIV infection rates, but the situation is worse if they live on the streets. Researchers say girls living on the streets of Eldoret could be dying in high numbers. End of run. How 2 Nigerians were deported to US for fraud trial. At the very top scroll on the Star, late review suppliers agony as OCO-led pending bills team misses deadline. That is the front page of the Star.
All right. Let's take a look at the front page of the People Daily. Cash crisis in schools, over 64 billion shilling state debt. Head teachers mull increasing school fees. You've seen the warning on the other daily, but head teachers are mulling increasing school fees to raise revenue for operations. Close institutions and send students home after government disbursed only 4,000 shillings for each learner instead of the promised 10,000 shillings. The story is on page 4 of the People Daily. And this our photo that has caused outrage online among Kenyans makes it to the front page of the People Daily. Yes, that photo of the CS for Education standing on a podium with a young primary school student holding an umbrella for the CS. A photo of people holding the umbrella. Of course, I've seen the CS Ezekiel Machogu defending himself on other forums, saying that everywhere he goes, children love him.
Oh, yes.
And this is just one of those instances.
And also saying that, well, the child wanted, assistance, and, well, he had to look for the CS, really. But then, well...
we'll leave it to our viewers to make judgment on that. Other highlights, Ruto to come face-to-face with hostile neighbors, makes it to the front page, the kind of tiffs that we're still having with our regional neighbors. But then again, on the top strip of the People Daily, that story that features on all the main daily newspapers today, how varsity student met brutal death. Killer took photo of himself holding hacksaw on victim.
Wow.
And sent it to her parents, demanding 500,000 shillings in ransom. And I think this strand, this version of the story, I don't think it has been captured in any of the dailies.
Yes.
The fact that the killer sent a photo of himself holding a hacksaw, the same hacksaw that was used to dismember Rita Waini. It is a very sad story indeed, and makes it to the front page of the People Daily this morning. From
BD to PD, Fred, allow me to cross over to the magic screen and take a look at the Business Daily. Israeli farm SBI paid 6 billion Kenyan shillings for Kenha road contract breaches. And more on this particular story right here. Payments follow orders by courts, UK arbitrators, and dispute sparked by cancelled deals for Kisumu Kericho roads. And just below that, Kenya elite investors to buy Nova School's buildings. And they also have pictorials there of, among others, Education Cabinet Secretary Ezekiel Machogu during the KCB Awards for one scholarships. And at the very right scroll on that ticker here, State House, new KCC top entities with mystery staff. It's interesting, Fred, I mean, yesterday, I believe we were talking about how the whole renovation of State House, and as much as State House itself is being, renovated and all that, but then the people within there should technically also be renovated, quote unquote.
Yes,
and have a whole audit of the stuff inside there, not only the buildings, but
State House is one of those no-go zones. So a lot that happens there usually goes largely unscrutinized for obvious reasons. But that audit, of course, exposing a lot that's happening there. For example, what exactly is happening with the 795 billion shilling renovations? What exactly is being built by a billion bob? So I don't know.
Right, let's cross over, rather continue. In matters companies, Fly Dubai launches direct Dubai Mombasa flights. And in matters markets, high deposit rates squeeze banks' lending margins. At the very top scroll, Thursday, they say Thursday is, getting into the Friday. So Thursday is the junior Friday. And the Life Pullout magazine talking about, do mocktails scratch the dry January itch? Fred, do they?
I have no idea.
You're not a mocktail fan?
Not really. But I'll tell you after the show. Let's cross the border into Uganda and see what's headlining. Government body wants 2-term limit for women MPs. A government body mandated to promote equality at workplace has recommended a 2-term limit for women leaders who join politics through affirmative action, similar to what we have in Kenya. A proposal which would call for changes in the constitution. That's a big headline in Kampala, Uganda this morning, as captured by the Daily Monitor. Of course, the ongoing non-aligned movement summit, and a number of leaders taking a photo there. Even as a representative ministers denounce Israel on Gaza war. Kenya's Prime Cabinet Secretary, Musalia Mudavadi, is there ahead of President William Ruto's arrival. He's expected to attend this summit tomorrow, that's Friday.
Okay.
So this, it's still a big talking point in Uganda. Remember earlier in the week they were washing roads in preparation for this. I think the roads must be clean now.
Well, hopefully.
Still in Uganda, take a look at the new vision. The new vision, Busoga Minerals to fetch 2.2 trillion shillings. Wow, that's a lot of money. But then again, remember, this is Uganda money. 2.2 trillion shillings, don't get excited. It's Uganda money. It could come down to about a few billion Kenya shillings. Yes, also more photos of regional leaders attending or arriving for the non-aligned movement summit. We do have Salva Kiir of Sudan, South Sudan, the president of Djibouti, and Somalia's president arriving there. Kenya's president, as we've said, William Ruto, will be attending the event tomorrow.
All right.
That's it as far as Tanzania is concerned. Uganda, sorry.
And before we cross over to Tanzania, let's cross over to Rwanda and take a look at the headlines. And the Africa Continental Free Trade Area is a whole conversation. And Fred, this is a conversation we had on Tuesday and as well as yesterday. The whole Africa Continental Free Trade Area and what really the purpose of Kenya when it comes to this particular FCFTA. And for industries, for investment to eye in Africa, intra-African trade in agriculture is expected to increase by 574% by 2030. Wow. That is on page 3. And they have a photo there of President Paul Kagame. Kagame roots for cooperation to address differences between global North and global South. And that particular photo there. And on page 3, they are focusing on matters, what is happening in Kenya. Kenyan cult, 95 accomplices face murder charges for over 400 deaths. So this really tells you how much this conversation has been going on, Fred, the whole controversial preacher Paul Mackenzie, and how not only even the East African bloc, but also even the continent and even the globe is taking a look at this particular story. Aside from that, how hard is it for autistic children to go to school? What is health there? And over 4,000 households to be resettled amid heavy rain. Right, that is the front page of Rwanda.
Okay, let's take a look at the dailies in Tanzania. And we start off with the Mwananchi. Kwenye gazeti la Mwananchi, habari kuu pale, Wasira afunguka, Mnyika ataja njia. I cannot claim to understand what they're saying, but this is a big headline on the front page of the Mwananchi. Vuguvugu la maandamano Chadema. So I'm guessing Wasira is one of those people and Mnyika is the other one. Wanachambua 4R za Rais Samia akimshangaa Mbowe kupotosha umma ili kuingiza watu mtaani, asema bunge halijamaliza kazi. Mnyika ataja njia za kupita vyama 13 vya upinzani navyo vyaibuka. Masuala ya siasa kule Tanzania, siasa za Chadema, hizi ni siasa za upinzani kule Tanzania. Hilo ni gazeti la Mwananchi.
The Citizen has a very interesting piece there, well away from the whole business-centric, how women-led ventures in Africa are underfunded, and they say revealed sources of Tanzania Kenya tiffs, and they have it. They're talking about the recent tiff between Tanzania and Kenya. So the former ban, Kenya Airways flights between Nairobi and Dar es Salaam, was a reflection of how the two countries employ non-tariff barriers to frustrate one another in the market. That is on page 2, more on that. And they have a quote there by Dr. Christopher Magomba from the Sokoine University of Agriculture. It is crucial that the heads of state address potential disputes before they flare up and also ensure transparency on any outstanding issues.
All right.
That is on that there. Matters unripe avocados. Unripe avocados was the big story in Rwanda. Was it yesterday or the day before? And
now it's in Tanzania.
Now it is in Tanzania.
It is an issue that also rocked Kenya sometime
yes.
last year. I remember a ban on the export of avocados because people are harvesting unripe avocados.
And even early this week also, there was a whole contingent that was arrested for exporting and trying to export the unripe avocados.
Yeah. Interesting. Turejee nyumbani tuangazie masuala ya karakacha, and I'll start off with page 14 of the Standard where we have the cartoon there and by Gamzo. And you know this famous phrase, Hakuna Matata? Now the famous phrase, we do have our Foreign Affairs Minister walking and blocking this phrase, at least blocking the first 2 letters. So you cannot see the ha.
It is kuna.
You just see kuna matata. And then he says, it's not what you're reading. And this has to do with Kenya's diplomatic tiffs with our neighbors, captured on the cartoon on the Standard today.
Right, and on page 15, again, the whole...
Of the Daily Nation.
On page 15 of the Daily Nation, the Mount Kenya rose, and on page 15, there you do have it, a gentleman sitting on a throne and wearing that particular crown on him, and there's a whole... Is it a belt or...
You see, the hold on the top of the mountain is similar to the ropes you use to control a horse.
Yes, yes.
They're almost snapping. So it's, I think it's indicative of someone rather losing their grip on the mountain.
Because those ropes are themselves cutting off.
Yes.
Let's cross over to page 10 of the People Daily. I was trying to have it here. Seems my magic screen has decided to misbehave. All right, let's see if we can have it once more. But then there you do have it. Matters AFCON. Silence, please. FKF taking notes on how to run soccer. And there's someone there's actually sleeping.
To be asleep.
Yes.
Remember, AFCON 2027 is coming to Kenya. So yes, whoever runs football in Kenya, Tanzania, and Uganda should be taking notes on exactly what's happening in Ivory Coast. And, but someone seems to be saying that these people are already sleeping. They're not learning. They're not taking any lessons.
Yes. Because right now Morocco is taking a lot of lessons, and they're going to be expecting to put a huge show come for the Morocco 2025. So
interesting. Well, those are the dailies this morning. Do stand by for our State of the Nation conversation coming in a few minutes after the break. This morning, we're looking forward to be hosting Dr. Wilfred Mutubu, a legal expert and political commentator in studio, Dr. Juliet Kimemia, leadership and governance expert as well, and Dr. Martin Olo. Today we just have doctors, a lawyer and political analyst. Ni maswala ya madaktari, lakini sio madaktari wa matibabu. Madaktari wa
masomo. Academias.
Academia.
Probably you should also advance and be Dr. Fred Indemoli.
Oh yeah, sounds not bad.
sounds-
Not bad.
yeah.
Dr. Fred.
Dr. Stanley Nyaringita, how does that?
Well,
We just leave it as it is. Right?
you can be part of this conversation on our social media pages on X at TV47 Kenya and on Facebook at TV47 News on X, TV47 Kenya on Facebook, and also do stand by for that conversation later on at 8 a.m. on long-term relationships.
Oh yes, Pastor Samuel and Rehab Mutonga getting their sentiments from the whole religious point of view, but also taking a look at what you are saying. The correspondents will be on the ground just to see what you're actually saying on this particular conversation on the same.
And that question we're asking, do you support that 2-year marriage contract proposal by the Atheist Society? Do you support that 2-year marriage contract proposal by the Atheist Society? You can share your sentiments with us on social media as well. You're watching Morning Cafe.
Good morning.
Welcome back. You're watching Morning Cafe. President William Ruto slammed the Azimio Brigade, led by Raila Odinga, over their recent remarks opposing a meeting between judiciary and executive to resolve arising matters in the judiciary, especially on the way forward regarding alleged corruption in the important arm of the government, stating it's vital for the three arms of government to work together. This comes even as the Law Society urges Chief Justice Martha Koome to be firm in guarding the independence of the judiciary.
The president's tour at Endebess, Trans Nzoia County came with not only a bag of goodies but also verbal war on the opposition.
Ama namna gani jameni? Wewe ni kiongozi wa aina gani unaenda kuungana na wakora na wezi ati kusabotage maendeleo ya Kenya?
The number one in command slammed the opposition brigade led by Raila Odinga in what he termed as hypocrisy for Azimio to ask Chief Justice Martha Koome and judiciary at large not to hold talks with executive as the three arms of government ought to work together.
Kwa sababu mimi nataka tusuluhishe haya mambo. Mimi nimekubali kwa heshima nitaketi chini na viongozi wa mahakama, nitaketi chini na viongozi wa bunge, tutatue hii matatizo ndio maendeleo ya Kenya iende mbele. Tunaelewana? Sasa tena mimi nasikia mtu ya kitendawili amesema ati tusiongee. Sasa mimi nashangaa hii ndio. Si mimi niliongea na yeye juzi. Wakati alikuwa analalamika ati mambo ya sijui nini. Si niliongea na yeye. Mbona hataki mimi niongee na wengine? Kwani Kenya ni yake peke yake?
For the first time in a public gathering, President Ruto revealing that he has held talks with the opposition chief in the recent past, urging Raila to shun double speak and hypocrisy.
Na unajua hawa watu matapeli wameenda kutafuta viongozi wengine ndio wawe watetezi wao. So these people, those who are opposed to any conversation amongst Kenyan institutions, so that we can sort out the challenges that face development in our country, are the ones that have been recruited by the cartels, by the crooks, by the saboteurs, so that they can continue to benefit to the disadvantage of the people of Kenya. And we want to tell them, shame on them.
Further, the president told of his critics on the housing project and his agenda to provide jobs for the youth abroad, programs he says will work for the betterment of the country.
Nataka niwahakikishie wakora na matapeli na wafisadi mambo yao ni matatu. Simple. Ama ni aje? Either wahame Kenya ama tuwapeleke jela ama
On the same breath, LSK has urged Chief Justice Martha Koome to stay firm and jealously guard the independence of judiciary. Elizabeth Mutuku, TV47, Nairobi.
Meanwhile, pressure continues mounting on President William Ruto and Chief Justice Martha Koome to call off the anticipated dialogue to discuss graft allegations in the judiciary. The Law Society and Azimio leader Raila Odinga opposed what they say is a travesty of justice that will take away the independence of the judiciary, urging Koome not to succumb to intimidation by the executive. Apollo Kamau reports.
Ahead of the much-anticipated petition by Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua to Chief Justice Martha Koome seeking the removal of Justice Esther Maina, pressure continues to mount on President William Ruto and the Chief Justice to call off the dialogue meeting, which the Law Society of Kenya LSK says has no place in law.
As a Law Society, we take a very firm position that such dialogue is misplaced and has no place in our constitutional architecture. We take the position that the Chief Justice should not kowtow to the executive by submitting herself to this so-called dialogue.
LSK also took exception with the manner the executive is treating the judiciary, citing the much-anticipated petition by the Deputy President as reckless and unbecoming given the stature of the DP's office. Gachagua's petition seeks to remove Justice Esther Maina for abuse of office and gross misconduct.
A court is corrupt merely because it made a decision against him is not only reckless, but is a case of tragic comedy, and it suggests to us that the Deputy President does not understand the public trust that reposes in his office and the requirements that are contained in the Public Officers Ethics Act and the Constitution.
In Bungoma County, Azimio coalition leader Raila Odinga, who was leading an ODM delegates meeting, opposed the Ruto-Koome dialogue, telling the Chief Justice to stand firm and defend the law.
Ati wewe nasema njoo sisi tuongee. Na yeye sasa nasema mimi nakubali sasa. Tuende kwa pamoja, tukae pamoja. Bwana, hiyo hatutaki. Hiyo hatutaki bwana. Wewe simama imara bila ulisema ati mahakama iko independent.
Sasa tunataka kumwambia Chief Justice, wewe ulipatiwa katiba ya nchi. Usiogope kitu chochote, hauhitaji kuzungumza na mtu yoyote. Sasa hii mambo unatuambia unataka kwenda kufanya mazungumzo kwa sababu Ruto amekutisha. Hiyo vitu uachana naye. Wewe uko na katiba, na chini ya katiba Wakenya walikupea nguvu. You are a president of an arm of government.
The ODM recruitment Bungoma meeting at Posta Grounds was marred by chaos after rowdy youths chanting Speaker of the National Assembly Moses Wetangula's name disrupted the meeting. ODM leaders led by Odinga condemned the incident. Apul Kamau, TV47.
In other news, public participation sessions for the Affordable Housing Bill started yesterday in Narok and Embu counties, with public hearings expected to continue in different counties in the coming days. This comes despite the High Court sitting in Kisumu issuing conservatory orders stopping public participation for the bill. Kesewa Emory with more.
The Affordable Housing Bill public participation started in earnest today in the counties of Narok and Embu, among others, with the exercise set to commence in another 17 counties over the next couple of days. Embu residents presented their views on the affordable housing project conducted by the National Assembly Departmental Committee on Housing, Urban Planning and Public Works, with individual members and groups taking the opportunity to give their views to the Johanna Ngeno-led committee, where many urged the government to make it as inclusive as possible.
A change is coming. Normally people will resist a change. But as a church, we have already complied.
Maneno ya manyumba watu wengi wanaweza kuona kama sio ya maana kwa sasa, lakini miaka 10 inakuja itaweza kuwa mambo ya maana kwa vile watu wale wa chini wataweza kupata hii manyumba kwa vile tunapatiwa nafasi ya kulipa kidogo kidogo.
A similar exercise led by Finance and National Planning Chairman and Molo MP Kimani Kuria and MPs from the Housing, Urban Planning and Public Works was conducted in Narok County. There were mixed reactions, with a section of residents opposing it while others supported it.
Is it optional for counties? Ama is a must? Can Narok County, for example, opt out? Ama ni lazima kila mtu aingie?
The exercise continues despite warnings from the LSK President Eric Theuri, who threatened further legal action should the public participation continue.
Those actions by Parliament, we want to warn, if they are undertaken, would be an illegal venture. And we are going to initiate proceedings to surcharge anyone in Parliament who will authorize the public participation forums to proceed when there is a court order stopping that process, because that is illegal. They are not using their money, they are using taxpayers' money.
The High Court sitting in Kisumu had last month issued conservatory orders stopping public participation of the bill, but the sponsor of the bill and the leader of the majority in the National Assembly, Kimani Ichung'wah, noted that the orders by the High Court only apply to written submission and not to the scheduled public hearings. Kesewa Emory, TV47.
Now, some of those stories set the stage for the discussion we will be having later on. We'll be delving into that tiff between the executive and the judiciary and whether or not that dialogue should happen. But before that, there are other stories to look at, especially what is the one story that features on all the front pages of all the dailies in Kenya today, and that is a killing of Rita Waini, the gruesome murder of this 20-year-old girl whose dismembered body was discovered somewhere in Roysambu. Allow me to introduce my panelists this morning, starting from my immediate right, Dr. Wilfred Mutubwa, legal expert and political commentator. Good morning, karibu sana. It's good to see you in the new year. Karibu sana.
Thank you very much, Fred. Good morning.
Good morning to you. Then Dr. Martin Olo, lawyer and political analyst. You're the one who was with us for our very last show last year.
Absolutely.
It is also good to see you in the new year. Karibu.
Nice seeing you, Fred, and thank you for having me. And sitting next to a very handsome gentleman when I grow up.
Well, gentlemen, there's this story that I know we'll get to discuss issues to do with the judiciary vis-a-vis the executive, because that's one of the biggest discussion, and I'm sure you are itching to contribute to that. But before that, there's a story that is even more concerning, and it features on all the front pages of all the dailies in Kenya today. On the front page of the Standard, killers chilling SMS demands revealed. On the front page of the Daily Nation, date with death, last moments of Varsity Girl. If we look at the Star, murder, family tales of ambitious Rita Waini. That's a big headline on the Star this morning. On the People Daily, it also features there how a varsity student met brutal death. And on the People Daily, they tell of a story of how the killer took a photo of himself holding a hacksaw on the victim and sent it to the parents, demanding $500,000 shillings in ransom. That story is also featured on the front page of Taifa Leo. Mbona walienda na kichwa chake. Gentlemen, this is very disturbing. Women leaders have already called on the government to declare femicide a national crisis or a national disaster. And the Standard has done us justice, at least it has featured or listed the number of cases why these women want this to happen. They've listed a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 girls who have been victims of such gruesome murders in recent weeks. Now, it is definitely something that's very concerning, but you wonder, what is going wrong in Kenya, Dr. Mutubwa? Because yes, murders are not a new thing. Murders, cases of suicide are not a new thing. But now we are seeing a trend that is very concerning. What is your take about this issue?
This, Fred, let me begin by saying thank you for having me today. But the problem is a societal problem. And I think I have heard people speak about it as femicide and a trend that is almost, now becoming a trend, something that is taking root, particularly in the cities, and unfortunately involving university students or young ladies who are really at their prime. And the explanation that seems to come to the fore is that this is a premeditated scheme by some people, extortionists. This is high criminal activity. But again, it points to the state of security in this country. I can tell you that the state of security, burglaries, criminality, criminal action is a direct reflection of the economic circumstances under which people operate. You have had reports from South Africa and elsewhere about the high rates of murder and robberies has a direct correlation with the ability of people to access basic needs. And when people get desperate, then crime goes up. I do not know whether this is femicide. I have seen the events. There is definitely a pattern which is consistent with the targeting of women. And now the new twist I see is the demand for ransom, which is really kidnapping. And I do not know how we will get to the bottom of this. One of the things I always have a problem with in this country is our ability to investigate crime. Crime sometimes is left in the hands of the victim or victims' families. You are told, very disheartening when you go to police stations, you are told you come with the evidence, go and bring witnesses, something that you have no capacity to do. I hope and pray that the families of these victims will find to know exactly what happened to their kin and kith. But more importantly, I wish to hear the police, the Minister for Interior, the Minister for Police, that is the Minister for Interior, make a very deliberate statement. He must come out and say what the government is doing to stem this activity. Of course, there are people who will tell you, why were these students doing this? Why were the young people going to do this and that? But in a society that has the rule of law, because I've heard people speak about the rule of law in the recent times, it is expected that everybody's life and well-being is protected by the state. And the way you do it is that when an event like this happens, there must be consequences, there must be movement with the police, ensuring that people are taken in for questioning and you have the culprits arraigned in court. That is how you reassure the public that something is being done. Unfortunately, the problem we have is that the public now is going into panic mode because it seems not to see anything tangible being done. And I think that is where our police actually fail us, because the police should always, by their actions, make the public believe that crime does not pay, that there is action immediately crime is committed. I have been involved in many, some of these criminal cases, and the disappointment you get is that even the police do not have the ability to secure properly a scene of crime. And as a result, even when arrests are made and people taken to court, the defense has a very easy time poking holes into the theory of the prosecution, and in the ultimate, people lose faith in the justice system. That is the sadness of the affairs today.
Dr. Lo, do you agree with Dr. Mutugwe here that there is a correlation between the kind of crime we're seeing and the economy and the economic situation? Because yes, it is said that some of these young women have been lured to their deaths using money, and hence probably there's that need to make some money. It is still yet to be proven if that's the case. There's also the demand for ransom, meaning there's an economic element to this crimes. Do you agree with that assessment?
There is, what he's saying is largely correct in the sense that we are dealing with a problem. The moment things such as murder or the trends that we are seeing begin to show up, it means there are underlying causes. We are looking at mental health issues. You are looking at actually potentially what, again, in law we would say is a problem of our own success, because you are looking at freedom of expression, you're looking at availability of information across platforms. And I want to go into the issue of cyber security. We are sharing so much information on Facebook, on WhatsApp, on X. So there's a lot of information available around which people are using to extort. So I have posted a very nice picture of myself on my Facebook. I am attracting a potentially criminally bent fellow. They can follow me on my Facebook. They can begin to engage with me, and they are looking friendly. For example, in the case of Waini, this guy had been chasing to meet her. She has been resisting. Until this day, she says yes. And it happens to be the worst of the days. So there's we have a lot of space. And again, this is something that even from where we sit as lawyers, how much of regulation do we require, but also how much of freedom do we release, especially in the internet or in the digital space, so that then there's a lot of criminal activities that are happening just because people have access to information. That's largely outside our archaic policing system. You see, the problem we have with this country is that we are very good at spying, we are very good at managing political crimes, we are busy following people we think are having political interest. But then our system, we are forensic laboratory on this road, this Kiambu road, we are then supposed to be improving a lot. You don't tell me CCTV footage has been interfered with, a murder has happened, a fellow has disappeared. I mean, we must improve how we are following up and how we detect crime and how we actually connect the various data that's available from the scene of crime.
There's a question about personal security, and you've mentioned the kind of liberal way we are using social media, because it may be impossible to police personal choices. All these are adults above the age of 18, and we are not seeking to blame the victims, but our police or our security agencies may not be able to police all the decisions or choices that all Kenyans make. There's an issue of how we take care of our own personal security. Kindly comment on that.
You see, what I'm talking about, Fred, is that we have to up the game. When we talk about digital developments, that's where we must be. For example, our forensic laboratories, our investigations, and our security apparatus ought now to improve on how they police that space. So when we say forensic, we are simply talking about that we are recognizing the challenges around managing to do an investigation based on paper. So we must also look at the various footprints, the various fingerprints, and the various digital connections that we can have. So yes, we must get into that space. Not so that we spy, not so that we invade people's privacy, but so that we can have a full understanding. Remember, the whole issue around anti-money laundering and the whole issue about terrorism is being pushed through the blockchain technology, Bitcoin technology. So we have to get there as a security apparatus. We have to know how people are going to use this available technology, which is both a force for good and can be a force for evil, how it can potentially be endangering to our citizens. Okay. So all we are saying is that let's up the ante, let's focus on what matters, because these are spaces that are now existing. Of course, the caution also should be, and I say this in a very nuanced manner, because we also need to know how much of our private information we really want to put out there.
Yes.
I mean, I see too much information sometimes that I wonder whether that is really necessary. Like my friend here eating ugali and whatever, sitting with his shorts and he's posting. Now, it's okay, but you see, what really do you want to do? Because then somebody who has a criminal mind is actually getting interested in you and following you.
Okay. We'll be talking about this and other stories, other discussions after the break. And you can be part of this conversation as well through our social media. Be part of this conversation on X at TV47 News and on Facebook, TV47 Kenya. You're watching Morning Cafe.
I'm saying I'm approaching.
Fair enough.
And we are saying we have to change also our culture. We have to borrow from Indians, where you sit, your daughter is of age and your son is of age, you sit and do profiles. This is the man that I want my daughter to marry. This is the woman I want my son to marry. We have to be involved in this lifelong decisions.
And later on, we'll be having a different conversation after this one on the secrets to long-term relationships, because there seems to be a preference for short-term engagements for probably different kind of gains. And Dr. Mutubu here pointed out a possible correlation between the kind of crime we're seeing and the prevailing economic conditions of the country. Do you agree that that could be a part of the problem?
Yeah, it's a major contributor. Because facts be told, many of the young people, 80% of our young people, don't have meaningful employment. So poverty is a driver of very many things. In fact, poverty is the leading contributor to gender-based violence. You know, GBV is a huge conversation. And poverty is also very expensive. It eats into the economy by just low levels of productivity. So I agree.
Okay.
And maybe one of the things that we are adding on to it, there's also the mental health, and there's also just general the stress levels in this country. In the last week alone, I've lost a very close young a lawyer. He crashed in an accident. We do not know exactly what happened to him. This weekend, again, a colleague of mine, a lawyer, lost his son in a road accident. So there are a number of things that we have not come to terms with that are actually, we are looking at symptoms. We are looking at real challenges happening. We are looking at a state of hopelessness, because when you have accidents, you have deaths, you have murders, you have suicides. There's something boiling up, and as a society, this is when you stop and say, hey, what is it that we are? Later on, we'll be saying we have the rule of law being violated, we have people arguing in the open about whether to obey court orders. I mean, we are preparing ourselves slowly to the state of anarchy.
Wow.
Remember one thing, Fred, let me just add this to what my colleagues have said. You have seen a state of despair, hopelessness, desperation. Those are symptoms of a societal problem that becomes a major, major problem like this one. Because you find when you see people who have gone to college tear up their degrees, hang themselves and die, because 10, 15 years after graduating, you're not getting any meaningful job, yet you are told by this society, rammed into your head, that if you work hard, there will be success. I mean, for those of us who were there slightly earlier, if you worked hard, there was some chance that you will make it. In our profession, when we started out, I knew you could almost always get a job. Today, we have thousands of lawyers who are on the street 3-4 years after graduating. They do not really have a meaningful job. What does that tell you? It tells you that a society is going deep into depression. There is a societal problem that cannot be cured by just speaking about it. And remember, we now have people who are social media addicts. Many people cannot stay 2 hours without looking at their phones. 2 hours alone. Very difficult. And therefore, there is peer pressure. There is a lot of pressure in society to always look like you're doing well, to always look like you're succeeding. And when people who cannot take that pressure look at it, they choose the shorter route and say, look, what do? I must go into crime, or the alternatively, I have to, give up my life. So there's a lot of suicide also. People are looking at femicide, people are looking at kidnaps. There is a lot of suicide happening. There are people who cannot meet their everyday obligations. Yet, in the eyes of people in social media, they are doing very well. And as a result, it has to give at some point. Because you see, you cannot hide these problems throughout. And therefore, Fred, the biggest problem we have in this country, as she has just said, is that we are a society that they say, the younger people say that if it's not on social media, it didn't happen. So people want to make it happen. and they want to look like it's happening for them. People will even post that they have gotten great jobs, while a guy is actually languishing somewhere in a bedsitter. There is a problem, and the problem is deep-seated. It is a problem also of opportunities. And the sooner we start looking at it, because the truth of the matter is almost 60% of people who graduate every year are not able to get into the job market immediately. Okay. So Fred, the society must come up with measures. It is not enough to say that this is a national disaster. It could very well be. But what are we doing about it? Are we despairing as a society? Is it now time to call out the problem of the economic crisis, the stress that comes with it, the desperation that comes with our circumstances? Our education system is also very aggressive in terms of the way it puts you in a place where you are pushed very hard to believe that if certain things happen by certain times, you will get to a certain place. And when it doesn't happen, many people do not have alternatives. And it becomes a critical problem.
Interesting.
Yes.
That's a big discussion this morning.
Yes.
There's a recent spate of gruesome murders, especially targeting young Kenyan women, university-going students. The Standard has listed and even included faces of some of the victims on the front page this morning. This coming from that story about Rita Waeni, the 20-year-old whose dismembered body was discovered in Roysambu on Sunday. It is a story that features prominently on all the front pages this morning of each and every daily in Kenya, on the Standard, on the Daily Nation, on the People Daily, on the Star, and even on Taifa Leo. Indeed, it is one of the biggest stories, but I beg that we move to another discussion. This discussion will definitely continue, and we'll be talking about it even tomorrow. Just before we began this discussion, we ran two stories about this push and pull back and forth between the executive and the judiciary, with the latest argument being whether or not the executive should have a sit-down with the leadership of the judiciary. The Azimio leadership has come out and said categorically that should not happen. President William Ruto is now calling out the Azimio leadership for saying that. And the president, in saying this, also cited or drew parallels with the kind of dialogue that happened last year as a precursor to the National Dialogue Committee. The fact that he and the Azimio leader, Raila Odinga, had a sit-down. And you're saying, if at all I could sit with him, why can't I sit with any other leaders? And he said, kwani Kenya ni yake peke yake. But the assertion by the president, or the problem that he pointed out to the judiciary, was very clear. He said there is rampant corruption within the judiciary. This is a problem. Corruption is a crime. Do you sit down and discuss a crime? And that's a question many people are asking. What is the necessity of such a dialogue between the executive and the judiciary, if at all the issue is criminal culpability?
Okay, what you are sketching is a very interesting conversation, and I like the president of this country for his diversionary and scuttling tactics. Meeting with the opposition leader, or I don't even know that Raila is an opposition leader, because there is nothing like an opposition leader. In this country, our constitution says that a leader of minority and a leader of majority. And we know those people, they are in parliament. Now, when you're out here and you lost an election, I'm not sure whether you become an opposition leader in the current constitutional dispensation. So if meeting with Raila is two politicians meeting, it is different from wanting to meet with the head of the judiciary, the Chief Justice, the president of the Supreme Court. Because what you want, especially the agenda you want to tackle, would go into undermining the independence of the judiciary. Because you are okay, you are in the executive. You have the responsibility to investigate and to prosecute, because prosecution and investigations are in the executive arm. If you think there are issues, you have also the mechanism to kickstart them. You haven't started those mechanisms. What you are doing is that you are going to the court of the public, making allegations, prosecuting them, and making decisions over them. So you're saying there is corruption. We are going to deal with it. these people must go. You already made the allegation, you already said what you want to do and how you want them to go. So you have concluded the case. So when you see to the judiciary, what are you likely to talk about? Unless it's intimidation, unless it is directing it to act against its independence and so on. So that when you are saying that you want to meet the Chief Justice, all of us who are for separation of powers and who are for independence of institutions have our eyes and our antennas raised. Because what are you likely to talk about? You see, as the president of this country, you have a mechanism that if a judge is to be removed from the courts, you will have to establish a tribunal. And you have the opportunity to choose that tribunal, including who becomes its secretary. Now, that report comes to you, and you decide whether that report is to be adopted or not, depending on how you look at it. So if you already decided that Judge X is corrupt, how will you form that tribunal and of what use will it be? So in other words, that you already conflicted in advance, and there is fear that there will be no justice, there will be no fairness in such a process. So what then the president is doing is very, very characteristic of a politician who wants to have his cake and eat it.
Okay. Dr. Kimemia, let's be fair to President Ruto. The suggestion that they could actually sit down and have this discussion came from the CJ herself, saying that we are willing to have that dialogue and discuss some of these issues. Do you think it's right for the CJ to give in to such demands for a sit-down with the executive to talk about issues that clearly they already laid down procedures on how to deal with them?
I don't believe sitting without ironing out the cumulative issues that have led to these public spats. I was privileged to watch the two live when the president was at, I think, Nyandarua for a funeral, I think the senator's father, when his words just caused me to tremble, because he even called the PS in charge of infrastructure and told him, "Yo barabara lazima ianze kujengwa." And I think it's a construction that had been stopped by the courts. And he went flat out, very harsh words against the judiciary. It scared me, really scared me, because that's not the way to go. That's not how people resolve conflict. That you can issue, and you know nowadays, whatever the president pronounces is an executive order. That is what we are seeing. Because the other day he said, sijui kuna ile miti mzee ikatwe. And the same day we saw people get into the forest and really cut trees. So whatever the president says nowadays is equivalent to an executive order. So
what do you say to the suggestion by the CJ that for the need for dialogue actually came, those sentiments came from Chief Justice Martha Koome?
Yeah,
the
that's
suggestion
why
that they could actually have dialogue.
That's where I was headed. I listened to her when she issued the presser, and she expressed serious concern that if this trend continues, we are headed into a constitutional crisis. So she would not want us to get into a constitutional crisis, and therefore probably it is in order for the two to just have a sit around so that even the president understands what he should do and say in public and what he should not.
So there could be some necessity for some form of dialogue because right now we're discussing whether or not this dialogue should happen. And I remember even before the National Dialogue Committee that sat at the Bomas to canvass different issues, there was also debate. Why do we need to sit? What is this dialogue for? The necessity of the dialogue. It is the same question we're trying to answer this time round. Dr. Kimemia says that probably there could be some necessity, probably to resolve some issues, probably not necessary to talk about corruption in courts. Do you see any necessity for such a sit-down?
Fred, I am a member of the Law Society of Kenya. I have listened to my president, whom I have a lot of respect for. I have heard my colleagues weigh in on this issue. The official Law Society position has been put. But as individual members, we also have our personal views on this matter. And let me begin by saying this. You know, the truce that has been called between the president and the Chief Justice and President of the Supreme Court is a good thing. In this country, we have always moved forward when we dialogue. There is absolutely no problem with dialogue. In fact, there is a lot of noise about nothing, too much ado about nothing in terms of what the president and the CJ said. I don't hold the president's brief. I am an advocate. I earn a substantial part of my living by going to court, by respecting court orders. And I think we must all respect court orders. Whether they are wrong or right, there are processes for challenging. But I want to make two very important points. The fact or the question or the argument that there is separation of powers, all these people, the president, the chief justice, the legislature, all these people derive power from the people of Kenya. They are funded from the taxpayers' money. And they all are accountable to the people of Kenya. And therefore, there is no absolute separation of powers between the arms of government. The executive reports, the judiciary must hold the executive to account. The president swears in judges. There is an overlap. Sometimes there is that responsibility, and that is why the Constitution chooses to call the relationship between the arms of government as they're independent but interdependent. So where is the interdependence? The interdependence comes in situations like this when people have to speak candidly about the matters of state. I am not saying the president is right in calling out the judiciary and saying there is corruption. But as the chief executive, as a person who Kenyans gave mandate, he has a right to say his views and to say that I have a problem with the judiciary. Just the way many lawyers after court sessions would tell you, I have a problem with the decision, I don't agree with it. How he went about it is a matter of choice. We may discuss that until the cows come home. But remember one thing. When you speak about problems in the judiciary, in the executive, and in other places, as a Kenyan, you are free. That is why we have a constitution which allows us to speak. And by the way, the day we stop speaking to each other is the day we will start killing each other. I don't see any problem in the president sitting with the chief justice to say, this is the way we are going to support you. Remember, no one complained when the president sat with the chief justice to agree to swear in judges that President Uhuru had refused to swear.
He did not need to have a sitting with
secondly,
for him to do that.
Secondly, he had to commit that he will do it. Secondly, because that was his function. Number two, the president sat and said, we are going to agree with you on the modalities of setting up the judiciary fund, which is a constitutional provision.
So that required a sitting?
Previous presidents had not done it.
But that required a sitting. Do you have a sitting to do your job as a president? I've heard what he has said.
Let me finish my point.
But we'll have a right to...
Yes, let me finish my point.
To respond.
Now, in this country, the legislature makes laws, isn't it? But we have an opportunity for people to also participate in that process in a dialogue. Public participation. Why has anybody not said that that is a problem, because why are we discussing things which you should do? The long and short of my point is
I'd like to challenge that because
yes.
the houses of legislation have been accused of ceding too much ground to the executive. By even having their own parliamentary group meetings in State House. And they say that now the houses of legislation are under the capture of the executive. It is the same argument that when you sit down and have this kind of conversation and you talk, then the executive appears to come out
Fred, you are already anticipating what the discussion is about. No one has said the discussion is about removing Judge X or Y.
Precisely.
No one has said
so
what exactly
what
is the agenda of the discussion.
What's the agenda?
The agenda of the discussion, as I understand it, is that the president wants to discuss a problem which has been identified in the judiciary. That is a discussion. Let me finish my point. Today in the UK, this is not unique in Kenya. The Chief Justice in the UK has been attacked because there are problems with the designation of certain judges in the UK. There is tension between the judiciary and the executive there. It's a good thing. It is a good thing because it enables the democracy to work.
Okay.
But let me tell you this. There is absolutely no problem for the Chief Justice, who every year delivers a State of the Judiciary address to the President and to the country.
Okay.
Why has it been said that that is just a
is,
part of the functions of the judiciary?
I guess the question then is on what exactly should this dialogue cover? Because the President is clear. His accusation against the judiciary is that there are very many corrupt judges within the judicial service.
You see, why I have a problem with what my brother is saying is that nobody is saying that in exercise of power, there can be absence of dialogue. Nobody is saying that. It's the intention and the agenda of that dialogue. And what we are saying is that in this instance, the President has gone with guns, with the barrels at the judiciary. So this conversation, unless couched in such a way that we can understand what that agenda is likely to be about the independence or undermining the independence. And that's what we are saying. It's not in good faith. Everything else that he has said, again, if you are not looking at it from a constitutional or a legal perspective, would look administratively okay. But the points you are raising is that yes, there are three arms of government. Each of them is independent, and each of them has a task to do. The judiciary, the legislature makes law. Sometimes it initiates law by itself, or sometimes it debates the law that the executive brings. But whatever the case, it makes law, but the judiciary will interpret the law. Now, to the extent that the judiciary is interpreting that law, it does not have to be, guided or be persuaded otherwise by the legislature, because you already made the law. It's independent. You interpret it. It is in the public view. What we are talking about, separation of powers, is not that it is a process that does not have a relationship. Indeed, what is government? Government is the three arms together, and who is the head of that government, and who is the head of state? Is the President. But in terms of executing those functions, each office is given independence and therefore space to make decisions, including in the judiciary. Even the Chief Justice cannot direct a judge on how to rule or how to do a case. The judge also exercises independence, so that when a matter is before the judge, they must exercise their own decision. And there's freedom. If you don't like what the judge has done, the next thing you do, you go for an appeal. That mechanism allows you to go even up the Supreme Court. And it's possible that in all those cases, you will not like what you get out of the court. But then that's what the rule of law says, that once a due process has been followed, then the product should be accepted to all. Otherwise, if we must always have our way, then that's not why you should go to court. So basically what we are saying is this: there is, again, no problem with dialogue in this country, no problem. Indeed, if any of these arms were to talk, and by the way they talk, and I'm sure they make phone calls to each other, we don't know about it and we don't need to know about it. But when you go to the public and say, we want to sit with the judiciary, then we, the Kenyan people, the sovereign Kenyans, would want to know, what is the reason? Do you want to undermine our constitution? Do you want to begin to interfere with the independence that we've guaranteed these various institutions? So that becomes our genuine concern.
And the question now is the judiciary balking from this pressure from the executive? We've seen the President make orders, that you pointed out, that he actually made an order that went against a court order. He gave a directive and said, we'll proceed with that. There are stories here about even MPs allied to the ruling administration going against court orders and executing evictions in different places. And the question is the ground already shifting? Do you think that admission by the CJ that probably dialogue is important was her giving in to pressure?
Yes and no. Yes, because for sure we have really witnessed a lot of vindictiveness in the pronunciation by the powers that be. And it gets to a point where you're like, okay, inchi ni yako, and my life is more important than in my sanity and my mental, like what we were talking about here, my mental wellness is more important than anything else, and therefore you get to a point where you say, I won't argue. But My thinking and my wish is, as they get into this dialogue, clarity on the definition of the word corruption must be, the definition of the word corruption must be very clear, because you cannot support corruption here, you cannot support the dropping of high-profile cases and withdrawing of high-profile cases because of apparent lack of evidence 10, 8 years later, and not talk about corruption in the decision to withdraw those cases. And now when it's against a set agenda, then you flag out corruption as what is coming between you and your achievement of your agenda. There has to be clarity. Otherwise, we are just seeing cat and mouse games, and it's not healthy for us. 2 years into this administration, Kenyans are really pissed off.
Okay.
They don't watch news.
Okay.
Fred, let me just tie up a point. You know, this is not the first time that a Chief Justice is calling for dialogue with the President. I don't know why it has caused a lot of anxiety. Former Chief Justice Maraga said he looked for the President. He was asking for appointments many times. You heard him lament because he wanted to have dialogue, because the arms of state must speak to each other. And President Kenyatta then did not accord him any appointment or allow him to speak to him, just before he made the edict writing to say that you must now dissolve Parliament. What am I saying here? Is that there is absolutely nothing wrong. There is a lot of anxiety. I think there is statesmanship, there is leadership in the statement of Chief Justice Koome and the President accepting that there is dialogue. What we need to be saying today is that let the dialogue be open. Let the dialogue be structured. Let it have an agenda that speaks to improve and strengthen the relationship. I think the problem we have with this country is that we are overly suspicious sometimes, unnecessarily suspicious. When the President says, for instance, that, look, I have a problem with the judiciary stopping my programs. The President is expressing his view and the view of many other people. We as lawyers believe that the judiciary has a place in making decisions that affect our lives. That is what we have given ourselves. Let's now discuss the content, the context, and the structure of that discussion. Let's not throw away the baby and the bathwater. Where the problem is that I see people today saying judiciary, the President should, the Chief Justice should not allow for any form of discussion. And yet, previously, the Chief Justice has actually sought to discuss with the President.
What about the issue of good faith? Because now with the defiance of court directives,
that is a problem.
Changes everything.
I don't agree with some people who are defying court orders, particularly those which have stopped or issued conservatory orders on certain projects. I think what the Chief Justice should say is that before we engage, we must get an assurance that government has to comply with court order.
Yet
I have even given a proposal.
Not just with this administration.
I have even given a proposal.
Was accused of defying very many court directives.
Yes.
You see, for me, what you're saying, Fred, is this: that should the Chief Justice go and sit with the President now, when Parliament is defying court orders, when the executive is defying court orders? In our view as lawyers, it would be endorsing that defiance of court orders, number one. Number two, and related to what you've said, the President has the Attorney General, who is the chief legal advisor. If he has a problem on why his programs are being stopped by court, the first person he should ask is my Attorney General. Why? If he doesn't get the right answer and the right advice, then he has a wrong Attorney General, number one. Number two, there is a mechanism that allows an ongoing dialogue and conversation between the executive and the judiciary, and that mechanism is the Judicial Service Commission. One, the chief representative of the executive in that commission is not just the Attorney General, But there are also 2 other appointees of the executive in that Judicial Service Commission. So the place that the president should go to is to tell the Attorney General and those 2 representatives, how come in the JSC our government issues are not being presented and discussed, or our concern? Indeed, the government, the executive, has every reason to complain about the judiciary. You complain through the Judicial Service Commission, through the representatives that you have, through the Attorney General, and the matter should receive as much weight like any other Kenyan or any other institution that can go to that JSC. Because when the JSC sits, it is it's a commission, it's a body that is empowered to listen to issues of the performance of the judiciary and issues of corruption or any other malpractices and resolve them. So that is the mechanism. So if you're asking for another mechanism, it is unconstitutional, it is not envisaged. Anything else, a cup of tea, a phone call, that can happen and should not be an issue.
Let's now examine the role that the other relationship within the 3 institutions is playing into this, the relationship between the executive and legislature. And it would be said that some of these legal hurdles that the executive is experiencing in the courts is as a direct result of the executive overreaching in its influence over the legislature, such that some of the proposals that come from the executive are simply rubber stamped through Parliament without necessarily the proper checks to ensure that it complies with the law, the Constitution, hence the kind of legal hurdles we are seeing. Don't you think that if at all the relationship between the executive and Parliament would have been as expected, then probably we would not even be having this discussion now?
You're right, absolutely. What we have seen, I think what is in court right now is the finance bill, the housing, and the social or health insurance. These are the ones that have really brought this traction in terms of the conflict. And if you look at the whole process of enacting those laws, the public participation, especially on the finance bill, a lot of what came from the public was ignored because it was passed as was initially drafted. So we saw and watched late into the night as the legislators voted, and you could see clearly that it was 100% politics playing out. Government politics, opposition politics. We have seen a backlash on UDA legislators that said no, especially my Iron Lady of Kenya.
Gathoni of Mshomba.
I attended a meeting that was in Githunguri immediately after that, and her rival was given like a standing ovation when he got in. In fact, the president told him, "Simama," and then of course the politics on the roadside. The deputy president was there saying, this kijana, unajua hata yeye alipata kura mingi, si mnataka hata watoto wake kwao kunuke kitungu. You know, that's a Kikuyu, a Kikuyu terminology that is like, this guy needs to be blessed. So I saw serious onslaught, personalized and really vicious, demeaning of her position as the area member of parliament, and a lot of actions that followed clearly supported her rival. So you're right. The legislature is under state captive. And I thought there was a law that was, or a motion that was being placed on the floor of the House on state capture. I would really like to understand what they mean by state capture.
Yes.
So legislature is the biggest contributor to this crisis by openly defying the will of the people.
And we've had statements from members of the legislature saying that we will pass that bill without removing a comma or a full stop.
Even a full stop.
That is what we're saying, that probably that is a problem, because some of the things being pointed out or some of those things being challenged in courts are some omissions, probably discrimination, something that could be termed as discrimination. These are things people are taking to court. If at all Parliament would have done its job well, we would not be having this crisis between the executive and the judiciary. Don't you think?
Yes, I agree. Let me begin by saying court orders must be respected. But the legislature has also made a very valid point. It's a point that is discussed across the Commonwealth. Whether in fact the judiciary should interfere with ongoing legislative processes or allow it to run its course first. Because that also goes to separation of powers. It's not just about the judiciary, it's also about the legislature. When people elect a government, now to your point, they elect a government because the government has promised to do certain things or undertake certain things. And a government struggles to make a majority in parliament. When you look at the US, when President Trump was president, the Republicans would rally behind his programs. Today you will find the Democrats rallying behind President Biden's programs. And it is not always that parliaments will be independent of the executive. Parliaments in a parliamentary system like ours, which has borrowed, the presidential system like ours that has borrowed from the American system, are really places where the president brings his agenda and policy through legislation and tries to push it. And parliamentary politics is about numbers. If you want to stop a program, bring your numbers, bring your arguments. There is nothing untoward in a parliament that is populated by the Kenya Kwanza side for pushing the agenda. What there is a problem is pushing through legislation that would be unconstitutional. That is a problem. But to push your agenda is not a problem. And what I wanted to say is that, look, if you look at it properly speaking, there is absolutely no problem in the president's side of things having a majority in the House and pushing his agenda. What we need is a better scrutiny at the level of the Attorney General, and perhaps there is a fully kitted legal organ in the legal department in Parliament to ensure that what comes in Parliament has been framed properly so that it does not meet opposition. One of the debates you get in this country is that at what point should judiciary come into the legislative process? In this country, you have seen the judiciary even stop Parliament from debating a bill, or stop them from even considering a matter, or even going to public participation before the bill is even ripe. Who knows, these things you are stopping could even have been improved. By the time it becomes an act of parliament, some of those things would have been dealt with. There is also therefore legitimate argument in the allowing a process of legislation to reach its end and look at the product. You are stopping it midstream and you have not given it an opportunity to ripen, to be sharpened, and to perhaps remove those contours which make it unconstitutional. Why can't we allow processes to run their course? Just the same way the judiciary wants to be allowed to do its job without interference. Why don't you allow legislation to reach and come out before you come in and exercise your oversight authority as judiciary? And I think it's a legitimate discussion as Kenyans, which we can have.
On the conduct of Parliament.
You know, what my brother is trying to remind me is the late Professor Okoth Ogendo's article, which talks about constitutions without constitutionalism, which means that the concept and the ideology of constitutionalism is independent of constitutions. So that if you have a constitution and you do not have a constitutionalism culture, then you have a problem. So what he's saying, it's okay that you can get majority in parliament, even if it means defying the law, even if it means disregarding the Political Parties Act. You can hobnob with the opposition and bring them together and call them part of it. I mean, there's a place where the hygiene, the constitutional hygiene, is lacking, and that's what we are attacking here. So my brother is okay from a political discussion, but from a constitutional discussion, the role of parliament is not to rubber stamp the executive, is actually to add value and to make better the quality of legislation and to ensure that the interests of the people are safeguarded. And then what he's talking about in terms of whether the process should come first or last is again a constitutional issue. when the Constitution talks in Article 10, and we're looking at the principles and the values, but public participation is not an afterthought. It is mandatory. In terms of constitutional hierarchy, you have to meet that threshold before you begin to meet this other threshold of independence of the judiciary, or even independence of the legislature and so on. So we must go back and look at our constitutions and decide whether we want to live by the principles of constitutionalism or expedience or anything goes, or executive edicts and executive orders. The beauty about the 2010 Constitution is that it has our history behind it, and that the things that we've said no to are things we've seen abuses around before. The cavalier nature in which we saw amendments to that constitution have been made impossible, or at least very difficult in the new constitution. So I would hear where my brother is coming from, and somebody has to speak to that area. But then when we look at the aspects of constitutionalism, when we look at aspects of the rule of law, then what we are doing is that we are actually subverting it for the rule by law. Because the rule by law is that, fine, the law has been made, let's go by it. No. Does that law cohere? Is it consistent with the Constitution and with the expectations of Kenyans? When you ask that question, and then you ask, did the Kenyan people participate in it, or were they consulted? Those become very fundamental issues. When we say that we want participation to happen, it was not an idle, inclusion in the Constitution. It meant that we wanted to be around on everything. Okay. Yes, we gave the executive power. Yes, we gave the judiciary power. Yes, we gave the legislature power. But we also retained some power for ourselves as Kenyans, wanting to keep on being consulted and to participate in programs.
But Martin, yes. when somebody says that now I am stopping you from consulting the people of Kenya, don't go to public participation, don't do this until you're hard and determined. Are you not contravening the very constitutional principles that Kenyans gave themselves? Kenyans said, before Parliament, before you make this law, please come to us in town halls and places and make sure we... But now somebody comes and says, we have presented a bill in Parliament, and the next day somebody goes to court and stops that bill from being discussed. You are being told, don't even go to people to participate in the public participation.
Precisely.
My view has always been, why don't you allow the thing to run its course? Public participation ends, and then we have an act of Parliament and ask, is this in conformity with Article 10? Does it reflect our values as people? Without discussing the bill, before it is even law, before it is even well cooked. It is like removing food from the kitchen, halfway cooked, and you're telling the person who cooked, this is bad food.
Precisely.
How is it bad food?
My colleague, precisely, make that argument at the next level. Okay. Yeah, make the argument at that level.
I understand why that public participation was stopped. Because it's on the housing thing, isn't it?
Yes.
They realized that for sure it was unconstitutional because it was discriminative. And quickly, wakaenda nyuma ya hema, they did some two amendments. It was mischief. So it is in order that public participation is stopped, because it was going to be manipulated the same way the finance bill was manipulated and forced down people's throats.
Okay.
And there is a precedent that was set by the current administration when they were in the last government, and they were opposition within government. Remember during the BBI discussions. So a lot of small motions were being tabled to frustrate the BBI bill and stuff like that. So actually they're just reaping where they sow.
Precisely.
They wamevuna.
You know the same argument
could
have been made of BBI.
Yes.
But it was told, even while it was still in that process. So the thing is that let us focus on the Constitution.
Exactly.
And if it is right, it's right.
Okay. And today, of course, the Deputy President is expected to file a petition before the JSC. With regard,
I hope it's before the JSC, because he wants to go to the Supreme Court. JSC does not sit in the Supreme Court.
Well, he is going to file a petition against a judge.
He has counsel who will advise him properly.
Okay. We are also giving free advice.
Okay, and as we come to the
watch as things unfold.
As we come to the end of our discussion, there's one thing I'd want us to comment on briefly. And this is the diplomatic or foreign relation issues that Kenya is facing, especially with our immediate neighbors. It is captured there on the cartoon on page 14 of the Standard. And that popular phrase, Hakuna Matata, we have our CS in charge of foreign affairs walking and accidentally hiding the first two letters of that phrase. So it is Kuna Matata now, and it's not what you're reading. And today or tomorrow, President William Ruto is expected to travel to Uganda for the Non-Aligned Movement Summit, which is happening there. And many of these regional leaders are present. And on the People Daily, therefore, the headline reads that he is coming face to face with hostile neighbors. And want us to comment on Kenya's handling of its foreign relations, especially with our immediate neighbors, leave alone the larger international community. As we wrap up, Dr. Mutubu.
I want to be very brief. I looked at the SPAT. It was something that was resolved under 24 hours. I want to commend the Prime Cabinet Secretary and his team for doing a good job. There will always be these kind of relations. Kenya must start knowing that within the East Africa community, the larger Eastern Africa, we are no longer the powerhouse we were. We are no longer the people with the only airline around. And therefore, reciprocity is going to be very important in terms of how we engage. I just was looking at statistics last year, and it looks like we are no longer the largest exporter in the region. So there are people who are importing from other places more than they import from us. And therefore, these are realities that come with an economy that is dwindling in terms of manufacturing prowess, because many of our manufacturing industries were supplying goods into the region. But now these places have established their own industries. We have had relative peace in Tanzania and Uganda, and in the Horn of Africa, countries are now becoming more adept, they are more progressive, and therefore the foreign relation approach must now be adjusted to reflect the realities of today. And this is going to happen many more times than we have seen, because it is countries looking out for self-interest. Remember, international relations is about self-interest. What is our interest? And I think the way this was done is good, but it's very important that we have a solid relationship with our neighbors. But I don't think some of these things are overhyped sometimes. It is usual that if you are asking somebody to allow you to bring cargo into your country, you will be asking for the same conditions going the other side. And if somebody refuses, you close the door for some time until they listen to you.
That issue was resolved in record time, yes, but we have other issues. The DRC recalled its ambassador, Sudan recalled its ambassador to Kenya as well.
Uganda has taken us to court.
Yes, Uganda has taken us to court. So there are so many other problems, and probably Kenya's response to Tanzania was in response to all this, that the problems are becoming too many. Let's sort out this latest one first.
Yeah, it's extremely unfortunate that within such a short time we have antagonized our neighbors, and I would really like to see a situation where even the president calls out his foot soldiers, Akina Murkomen, that there are boundaries on what you can say or what you cannot say. So my recommendation is that once he gets there, he just does a public apology that is very specific to Tanzania, because I don't know why KQ was banned, to Rwanda, to Uganda, to South Sudan, to DR, all of them. We have antagonized them. So this is an opportunity for our president to reach out to the neighbors and just do an apology and tell them that it will not happen again. The way you give a baby a sweet and they stop crying. And refocus. We have a very intelligent president. He's really lauded the world over for his oratory skills. So he has an opportunity to redeem us. Otherwise, we are doing not so well in terms of being trusted as Kenyans. And really our economy depends on really collaboration with our neighbors, and we have a responsibility.
We have to sort it out
for our generations. And my call, my humble call to the political class is can we all tone down? Otherwise, we are frustrating our society.
Okay.
Yes.
And the times may have changed, but surely 1 year and a half, a lot has changed in our relationship between our neighbors.
You know, there is something in diplomacy called gunboat diplomacy, and it is a style that can best explain how we in Kenya right now in our leadership is approaching our issues. You know, we want it by force. We don't, I mean, when we come to East Africa, we want to pose as if we are the best, and that is going to give us jitters. We are part of East African community, but we want to look like we are not. Right now, we are endorsing everything foreign, including EU. We are signing it without waiting for the East Africa. We are looking to America without thinking about our interests in the region. We are implementing tax policies without thinking about the East African Community Treaty and so on. So basically, we are actually going to see, for this presidency and this government, we will see ruffling up of our neighbors, we will see ruffling up with the African continent as we embrace the international community, the IMF, the World Bank. That is a trend that we'll see. So we better be ready for it, and definitely let us also be ready for that retreat by the rest of the East African countries from our aggressiveness, because we are aggressive as we speak.
According to the cartoon on the Standard, page 14, kuna matata. We'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Dr. Wilfred Mutubwa, a legal expert and political commentator, Dr. Martin Olol, lawyer and political analyst, and Dr. Juliet Kimemia, leadership and governance expert. Our analyst this morning as we look into the big headlines that matter to Kenyans today. Thank you so much for your opinions on the issues we've discussed. And as we come up to the end of this session, let me go through this editorial comment. Now, the recent wave of physical attacks on teachers following the release of KCSE 2023 exam results is deeply troubling and warrants an urgent response. Over the past week, at least 5 incidents have been reported where frustrated crowds stormed schools, forcibly removing teachers and subjecting school principals to violent protests over perceived poor academic performance. While it is understandable that parents may feel frustration and disappointment with their children's exam results, resorting to violence against teachers is unacceptable and counterproductive. Education is a collaborative effort involving parents, teachers, students, and the entire community. And blaming teachers alone is unfair. It is crucial for parents to recognize their role in their children's education and share the responsibility for academic outcomes. They also need to appreciate the fact that no amount of violence can turn a G student into A material. It is disheartening to witness politicians participating in these violent incidents, especially when their focus should be on addressing systemic issues, such as the provision of adequate facilities and resources for schools. Attacking teachers serves no purpose in making struggling learners perform better. Instead, it perpetuates a regressive cycle of violence that hinders the overall improvement of the education system.